Hello everyone and welcome. This is Jane Hill and this is the latest in my series of conversations that I am calling The Secret Spirit. The last few conversations have been fascinating, really interesting. We've always had a lot to talk about. So I hope that whether you're watching this live or you're watching this on the replay, you're going to find something really interesting in today's conversation. And the person I'm in conversation with today is Filomena Ianni, who is from South Italy. Welcome, Filomena.
Thank you,
Filomena is percussionist, is a facilitator of rhythm workshops, is interested in dance, movement. She is a singer, a songwriter and performs with her partner, Edward. And for me at the moment, most interestingly, she is completing her studies in dance and somatic movement. And I've been very lucky to have some sessions with Filomena in somatic movement recently, and I have been completely blown away by these. Really, really powerful stuff. So welcome, Filomena. And as you know, I think my interest in these conversations is asking people really kind of what drives you and what makes you tick and what brought you really to this very interesting work, and kind of your whole, well, not your whole story. I'm not sure we have time for all of that, but what really brought you to this work, and what is it that you really love about this?
First of all, thank you for having me on your lovely interviews. I've been following all the others. It's interesting that the way that you introduced me began from the more creative part of my life. And thank you for calling me a percussionist.
Well, yes.
Well, I play percussion and keep on studying various ones connected to one or other culture as I go along. But what's interesting for me about you mentioning the musical side first and the creativity in songwriting, facilitating drum circle, is that that's not normally how I am known or how I am used to introducing myself. I begin with the psychotherapy background and with the psychotherapy background, but it's what you say is more true to me. So we go straight into what I mean by that is that it's not true to my soul. How did I express myself? So I have arrived to this work, which is not even fully begun yet. I'm still finishing my training, and although I worked with body and the language of body therapeutically before, this is quite a different way of approaching the body and movement. And so I'm very much a beginner and waiting to finish my research and be able to dive into the work itself. But what brought me to it was this continuous falling into a more creative, more responsive way of expressing myself, first of all, and working with the entirety of heartbeat. And to me, that involves soul in the body and body and soul. So without all of those dimensions, I believe that we just can't fully reach the most generative, creative, and healing parts of ourselves. And so this calling into the rhythms of life through the music, through dancing, through other approaches to working with body is what has the guiding light. That's me. Now I feel at the center of it, to more full embracing all that.
Yeah, I think, and I'm afraid I actually forgot in my introduction to mention the psychotherapy angle of your background. But I think that's very interesting what you're saying, that up until very recently, the body has not been kind of really addressed, I suppose, in psychotherapy. It's very much talking. And while I'm sure the good therapist observes the posture and the body language of the person they're in a session with, it's not the same as what I understand somatic movement to be, where you're able to wholly express with every aspect of yourself your truth in some way. And so much that we want to address, I suppose, is beyond words. It's not always easy for people, I suppose, to verbalize what is most difficult or most profound for them. And therefore, to have the body involved also in a therapeutic setting is so much more powerful. But I'm guessing that as you were interested in percussion and rhythm and dance, this was a very natural progression for you to move into working in somatic movement in some way.
Yeah, well, you would think it's a natural progression, and then it's quite interesting and amazing how sometimes I'm saying this generally as I experience it in others as well and through my work, but for myself, it's amazing how long it has taken to be able to fully go for what felt aligned to be more embodied. I also need to say about that there has been that body psychotherapy and the different approaches in psychotherapy, that dialogue directly with the body, have been developing like somatics alongside from the beginning of the 20th century, 19th century, 20th century, I should say. The middle of the 1900s. But it's only come into focus more recently. Well, that's my sense of it. It's come very much more into focus all in recent times. And that's due to a lot of circumstances, historical climate, the fact that we have lost our bodies and our connection with our bodies in many ways. So there is a need to reconnect. But the psychotherapists that have dialogue with the body, their own revolution was to actually engage the body as the main speaker, rather than talking about it.
Yes.
And with somatic movement, with somatics, I find that there is an added revolution, and they're both valid, but I am now choosing to approach from that angle. Is that the body is very much, in fact, the definition of somatics is that the body experience from the body experience of itself. So this is about giving body as what we inhabit, as things are being center stage, and allowing it to tell us about its knowledge. And that knowledge doesn't often come into words, but it can be supported and translating into words, whether it can be known consciously, intuitively. But it's just to say that both disciplines have been trying to bring the body back into being the protagonist, the main character, the main actor. One from the point of view of resolving or healing or addressing a problem. That's in psychotherapy. We begin from a problem that needs healing. A development that needs to happen. Whereas the approach with somatics, if we work in somatic movement as an exploration, we begin with finding the places of resource and health.
Mhm.
And then we might come to a more really more therapeutic use of that, because that means we can just enjoy discovering our bodies and its language without having necessarily a goal to solve a problem.
Mhm. Yes, I think what I found interesting about uh, what I found interesting about working with you in these few sessions that we've had of somatic movement is the movement comes first. One is invited to move and to do something, make gestures, then to move and explore that further. And then that comes to an end, and then there's this very interesting process of, I won't say verbalizing or analyzing it even in speech, but it's like taking it a step further. It's like an interpretation of, what does this mean for me and what does this trigger? It's not, you're not trying to explain what happened. You're simply trying to almost take it a step further. I'm not really explaining myself very clearly here, but it's not that the movement needs to be decoded. The movement is entirely what it is, and then it's a jumping off point for further thought and understanding.
Yes, yes.
And it's a very direct route. I think in our sort of talking therapy, we can get, although I certainly spent 12 years speaking to a Jungian therapist and that were fantastic sessions, it's very much about imagery. I think somatic movement is much more immediate. The movement gets one into a connection with something very quickly and very immediately. And then it's like, that's the answer. Now, what was the question, really?
I like
that.
that.
Makes some sense.
I like this.
I've often felt that. Yeah, I told you last time we met that I spent 5 to 10 years once a week going off and dancing for 2 hours a week, and I used to come away and think, well, I know the answer. What was the question? And I really did, and I feel the same with somatic movement and the sessions I've had with you. So, what was it that I was trying to answer there? I've got the answer now, but anyway, I digress. But it's very powerful and very immediate way of getting to grips with something, I think, somatic movement.
It is, and that's also the reason why we also need to be aware of what the body hosts, and in the way of also things that might be discomforting, but we're not conscious of, that are not known or have been logged in, embedded in ways where then when we tap into them, they might show what they are. They might show themselves, and that's not to be afraid of it. Not to be afraid of the body. We have a long tradition of being afraid of our bodies.
Yeah,
it's the place of madness, the place of illness, the place of all the unknown, all the things that we're not familiar with. But the body, to me, is also the place of creativity, regeneration, of knowledge. Our animal knowledge. I'm not wanting to go bypass this and go straight into a more of a transpersonal or spiritual dimension. I think that comes from being really animal.
Yes.
My greatest, deepest spiritual experiences since I've been deepening into this practice have been to go straight into the biology of my body and going into the animal that sniffs around and crawls and finds its relationship with objects in the room or with the tree or with nature. From where then comes the wonder of how complex, sophisticated, and known that world.
Yes. And I think sorry to interrupt. Yeah.
No, that's okay. I'm probably digressing as well because I get excited about all this. I'm going to all sorts of ways. wasn't sure
Oh,
that I responded to what you were saying, but
mm,
we're talking about the beginning from movement and end coming to language. And these things can, and we don't necessarily always have to begin from movement. Sometimes we begin from telling each other what is what are we, what's around for us, what's alive for us in that moment. What we're thinking of,
yes.
right with us. The exploration of our body through the clues that we can grab hold of in that moment. It might be the breath or sensation or objects that we want to touch. Simple things then can lead into movement. The languaging at the end of it, you're right. I agree with you in that experience. That it's not an explanation. It's not an interpretation. It's a translation to me.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it. Yes.
So we then say, well, how was that? What did you experience? What did I experience as a witness? And it's still body, but we're trying to transfer the experience in words. And then I find out that's there's an answer to a question you don't even know you have asked.
Yes, that's right. That's right. What was the question? I need to work out the question. Yeah, yeah. And I'm wondering if you've always been interested in dance and movement throughout your life, and if actually that came first, and your interest in rhythm and percussion came out of your early interest in dance and movement. So how do these two things relate to one another? Or
That's a beautiful question, because, and I feel quite moved as you say that, because it reminds me, as I've been reminded through this training many times, that I have begun from movement. I mean, we all do. Movement comes before our words, before our thinking. We begin that way. But in my life, my first creative impulses and passions began with that. So I was always interested in dance. I was always dancing. I tapped on things and created fake radio programs on an old recorder.
Oh yes, yes.
By drumming on the table and doing a soundtrack with it. So these are the early signs, let's say. But moving to music, to rhythm and dancing, as manifested in all sorts of ways, and they were the initial passion, and also they were the things that were part of the worlds that others didn't intrude into. My own world. So
yes.
it was not secret, but I was seen dancing around and playing or singing to myself. But it was very much my own world, and then it started to be shared later on. But I did go to dance school. I did gymnastics to begin with, and then realizing that the floor part of gymnastics, where you actually are only using your body, you don't have any other tools with it, was what really interested me. And I went into dance, and I left dance school and contemporary dance. Then in the end, I was told I was too tall for ballet.
Oh yeah.
And it wasn't my preference. I wanted something more fluid and less structured. And contemporary dance fulfilled that. Until then, I went to university and life changed, and I stopped, and other things happened. And my music, I never fully in-depth developed my musical knowledge per se, but I've always played and sang and wrote songs since I was very little, to my dog and to the trees, and I never stopped writing songs. And I'm not a wonderful instrumentalist. I'm not really very seasoned into the playing of a particular instrument, but I play them enough to create something of a song, something can be shared. So yes, they've always been there. It seems like I'm almost surprised looking back that didn't become the mainstream of my choices. I come back to it from the angle of wanting to find more channels to our growth and our healing, and in the Jungian sense, to our individuation, to become more authentic, to become fully ourselves.
Yes.
My answers are very long. I apologize.
No, it's great. It's great. Thank you, Filomena. No, there was something you said there that I wanted to pick up on because it so resonated with me. I mean, everything you're saying resonates with me, but one thing you said where, you know, you as a child and a teenager were into dance, gymnastics, then dance. And then you said, then I went to university and all that kind of, I can't remember the exact words, but it kind of stopped, I'm guessing, and then you did other things. And I think for me, that resonates with me too, because I remember as a child and a teenager having this very imaginative life, this very powerful inner life. And then you get to university, and in my case, I was doing a law degree, so it's not surprising. But then I kind of thought, right, all that's childish stuff, and that's it. It's in the past now, and I'm not going to look at that again. And I will be this cerebral person, you know, this brain, and this is what it is now. And I think it took me quite a long time to recover from the effect of having done that degree. Don't get me wrong, I'm really glad I had a university education because it's so wonderful in so many other ways. You meet great friends that you make for life, and it opens your eyes to all sorts of things. But the one thing it's not good at is it kind of takes over your life. And then it's like you've got to go back. I think you said something about you circle back to these things that were always there. After maybe 15 years or something, in my case, you kind of circle back and realize you need those things that you kind of, in my case, left behind. And I think for a lot of us, there's difficulty in balancing the head on the heart, to put it briefly. We all need to use our brains, and we're all very glad we've got them and we're educated and all that. But sometimes it's very hard to find a way to really balance these two aspects of our humanity. And I wonder if you feel particularly that something like somatic movement or dance or music, you know, we need this in order to be fully balanced in our life.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts about what you said. A lot is coming up for me. First of all, about the abandonment of those parts of ourselves when we enter adult life in various ways. And it may be that there is university, maybe we get married, or there is, or we get into a job, a profession, or a role in life, and this is where the interplay with how we are socially conditioned to work from the top down.
Yes. So
now becomes our thinking life. There's nothing wrong in thinking, by the way. I'm not apologizing.
Absolutely. No, I absolutely agree. We need it. We need that too.
You know, this is still body. I'm doing this because we place our thinking in our head.
Yes.
So geographically in our body, we make our thinking be here where the brain is contained in the skull. But this faculty, this way of experiencing and filtering experience is what we are induced into, which is, and I'm not always in extreme ways, but as a trend in our culture, this is how we are molded. We are pushed into a way of living and interpreting and filtering experience that is thought. So the information is externalized. Information comes from outside, and we metabolize it in our intellect and then think. So what gets eliminated or abandoned is the whole knowledge and ways of metabolizing experience or experiencing that is in the rest of, in all parts of ourselves, in the body, the other parts of our nervous system even. And now it's a recent discoveries in neuropsychology, neuroscience, is that we have all these centers now along our nervous system axis that are a source of knowledge. They're in our guts as well. So we're thinking we're talking to the brain and the guts and all that, and there's all that coming up now. But what our intuitions, our intuitive life has told us, what the healers have told us, what psychotherapy even has tried to say, what dancers have been trying to say, is that there is knowledge in it. When you look at animals, it seems like an obvious thing, doesn't it? And you say, well, of course there is knowledge in it. How else do we orient ourselves? So there's all that. There may be life circumstances. My abandonment of the dance was, I thought at the time, quite practical because I moved to a different place.
Yes.
Then, yes, university, the study absorbs you, and then my life became quite full in all sorts of other ways. But I kind of continued the life of the body because I started to practice yoga, and then I started to teach it for a short time. So the body was still there, but it was a split. Yoga is my practice, and my life is...
Yes.
So I think there is... we know this. I think you and I were saying this in a different conversation. You said the phrase that I really loved, and you might remember it now.
Yes.
I think you wrote that on your page.
Yes.
Which was about what we're born with, but then we forget.
Yes, we're born knowing, but we grow up forgetting.
We're
born knowing, but we grow up forgetting. Yes.
I say that's the password for the whole story.
Yes. And that's when I said that to you, that phrase some time ago, I was thinking of that kind of life experience that, there's always a kind of break in Western, I suppose, civilization that, at some point you make this conscious break and it becomes about the brain and thought and the head. And then if you're fortunate, and it doesn't always seem fortunate, for some people it's quite traumatic. I think for me it was quite traumatic. You're forced to go back and then circle back to what you knew originally.
Yes.
And then engage again in a more, for want of a better word, a more intuitive way of living. So, yeah, it's very interesting to hear that aspect of your story.
Well, there's a lot of elements here. They're really juicy to me. To revert to a way of being that's bottom up instead, that's feet up and feet down.
Yeah.
Brings up knowledge that we've always had and suddenly becomes obvious to us. But also there was something in what you said, and now I lost the thread of that. But I wanted to connect to it. But I'll go where I'm going anyway. This way of existing includes all those changes. Our view. That's what I was trying to say when you mentioned intuition. This is part of the current debate, I find. Now that we're discovering more of these words that were considered more airy-fairy, ungrounded, almost mystical, New Agey, by which we meant something that has no foundation, like intuition, like following your heart, or listen to your gut feelings. Once you enter the body from the feet up and life from there, I find that you realize these are skills. These aren't new age, off the ground concepts. How does an animal decide what to eat? And that is instinct. Okay. There's an intuition about following one direction or other, or about feeling safe. But those are all part of actual skills, survival skills. Intuition, now I see, is a survival skill. It's a skill that orients us about things we don't have enough information yet about. But we could trust that our senses are telling us, maybe not, maybe this way. And then we find out why. It's a bit like what you said. You find the answer, and then you know what the question was. So intuition. Our heart is now we are less afraid of saying that our heart is also part of our brain, following our gut. Now we also are less afraid of saying, because the neuroscientists have given us the license now to. It's been proven. Our guts does intuit things and can orient us on things that we don't yet know, because the full information is not available yet. But there's a certain something. So I really find that, and this means that the thinking becomes a servant to that knowledge. So what you said about the heart and mind, the split between body and mind, which is historical and it's endemic in our culture. It's a revolution for me that needs to happen in the power balance between these parts. So while our dominant faculty has been the thinker, now the feeler, the one that orients itself into sensing, commands, and the intellect listens and translates.
Yes. And I mean, really, I think that I might be a bit vague on this, but I think this sort of split between body and mind is a fairly recent one in sort of Western thinking, actually. And it's completely sort of false dichotomy, because you know, as we've said, what is the mind but the brain embodied? You know, it's our thoughts come from our brain. It's clearly part of our embodiment. So it is a very sort of false dichotomy that is set up, but it is one that has proved very entrenched in scientific philosophical thinking up until now. And I think it's just beginning, as you say, to crumble. But ironically, because science is causing it to crumble, you know, as you said, neuroscientists are now discovering there are these links between, say, the brain, the heart, the gut. And because they're able to prove it, we are now being able, there's more trust in this idea that body and mind are not separate, in fact. And it's kind of an ironic position, I feel, but it simply backs up what we knew already, I suppose.
Yeah, but I mean, I think science is not just one. There isn't just one science, I believe.
No. Yes.
A tradition in the illuministic kind of science, positivistic kind of science, and that's changing. There is an evolution within science as well. There is the rising of quantum physics. Please don't ask me anything about it, because I don't know how to talk.
No, not right, but I know, yeah. Things are, yeah. It's all changing, all the thought about these things. Yeah.
Look at things in a different way. Let's allow for things to be discovered as we go, instead of preempting the answer.
Yes.
Let's be more experimental, more open to the ever-evolving nature of what we are investigating. Let's see this as a living reality that has its own evolution, its own transformative principle that's operating there. So there's a whole branch of science that's evolving in this way. And even I was listening to some dialogues and some conversation podcasts with even scientists have got different camps between them. And they're trying to, well, some are not trying to find a common ground, but some are.
Yes. Yeah. No, it is. That's very exciting. I think I find science just too far removed from anything I can really understand. But it does sound interesting when you know, it makes it sound as though what you were speaking about there, it makes it sound like, what can I say? The whole matter to which science addresses itself is alive in some way, is conscious. I think that's what I was getting when you said, you know, science is constantly evolving and what they're looking at is evolving. And I suddenly had this sort of image of the cosmos being conscious in some way, and not, you know, not like it used to be thought that it was a fixed set of rules. There clearly are fixed rules, but not fixed. And but somehow there's so much remaining to be discovered. I'm not quite getting, I can't quite find the words for what I'm trying to say, but there's a sort of sense in what you're saying, or that I'm getting, is that there's a kind of consciousness in the cosmos that in which we inhabit, I think, is what I'm trying to say. This is a long way from body psychotherapy and somatic movement, but it's all part of the same conversation.
Yeah, it is actually, to me, it's not a long way from them. It just proves, this conversation to me proves the fact that everything is body.
Yeah.
We can't do without it, we can't bypass it. And so we are talking about different ways of knowing, different knowledges, different paradigms. And we arrive to this by talking about the body. Right?
Yes, absolutely.
We experience, or the gateway to experience becomes the body, and then we find all this. Isn't that extraordinary?
Yeah, it is extraordinary. Yeah, and I think for me, the sense that everything is conscious, I think that's another thing, that if we're talking about embodiment, then everything that's animate is in some sense conscious, which I think I kind of believe, but I'm beginning to understand it in a different way as we're speaking about this. And that there is perhaps a kind of cosmic dance going on. And again, I can't say what I mean by that, but it's very meaningful to me to say that consciousness is dancing in some way in animate beings, or that they're engaged in a dance of consciousness. And now I might be playing with words, but it's just opening up a new avenue of thought for me, what you're saying.
Yeah, I find that you're playing with images, that you're trying to express some kind of image. You're saying the cosmos is about dance, and your words evoke some images for me here. For example, all the kind of mythologies that explain the creation of the world through a dance, the cosmic dance, in fact.
Yeah.
Something dancing, moving, stirring, and also even the Big Bang Theory talks about the explosion and movement and things being
energy. It's energy which is moving. Yes.
There's so much in us symbologies, the symbols we create that tell a similar story when you look at it. There is a sense that movement is everything, that everything begins and evolves through a movement. And to me, the great excitement and the hugely deeply moving and home finding that I have experienced by finally giving in and falling deeper into the body and asking, what do you know that I haven't found out yet? Is to discover how I feel as though the whole universe was to be found there. And now that sounds mystical, but that's what mystical is for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's right there. All the mystery and all that's to be known and all that's to be learned is there.
Mm.
Whatever body we have, it's in the moving of life. There is information, learning, healing, and creation. And you don't need to go very far from biology to see that.
Yes. Yeah. It is already there. It's already part of the body.
Intelligence that makes all of this organize itself and become always life. Some call it God and some don't. And some see it as an external force, and I see it very much as the force that we all manifest in different ways.
Yeah. I think I found that in my somatic movement sessions with you, that one is connecting very immediately and very powerfully to, it's difficult to say whether it's something which is already there within one waiting to be discovered, and it probably is, but there is a sense in which it goes beyond the boundaries of the body. And I don't know if that's the kind of thing you're talking about, the sort of mystical side of it, where I might feel in some sessions that, you don't have a body anymore. You're not actually, you're using the body to express it or to explore this, but actually you're unbounded by the body. And I don't know if that's something that you would recognize or
I do. I can give you my own version of that then, because I'm not sure that my experience is.
Might be a personal thing.
Yeah, my experience is not the answer to yours. It's just that I tell you about it so that they might see whether they resonate. And without disclosing anything of what we have done in the actual co-creation. So my sense of that kind of loss of boundaries, that actually I still feel that I have boundaries, as in I am still in my body.
Yes.
So I don't lose a sense of being located in my body. And that's very important, actually, to keep that connection and that grounding. Or you wouldn't be able to speak about it. That means
yes, sure. I mean, you would be not here anymore. Yes.
So you have actually been witnessing yourself, or I witnessed myself into falling deeper into such a fluid contact with the source of my movement, and then that connects me perhaps with the trees around me, or with the ground, or with the air I breathe, or the light that's coming through the window. That there is almost a point where there is no difference between me and that light or that tree, in essence. So that I feel that although I'm in this body, I am like that tree. That tree actually is very much like me. We've got something here, we're sharing. So that the sharing and the loss of confines, it's in the essence. For me, it's like feeling that my nature is a different form. My body is a different manifestation of that same nature, that same life. So, and with that I mean, sometimes there are dance practices guided to do with becoming more, getting more in touch with my cellular life. Now that's very much inside the body. That's my skin, I mean, the cells, minute, minimal part that composes everything. And in there, I felt there was some kind of cosmic resonance, like the fluidity of that, the pulsing space. I knew, and I was helped, I was supported in maintaining my sense of still being here in my body, but being in touch with the reality that's the same as the universe, is the same as the ocean, is the same as the baby in the womb, is the same as the fish in the river. And in that similarity, that resonance, I feel like I am part of a bigger pool of life. But at the same time, I am feeling this as a witness that knows I'm still in this body. Does it make sense?
Yes, that absolutely makes sense. And I think that is what I was really trying to say. You've put it much better than I could have, that there is such a deep sense of connection. Yes, one is still aware of being here, and in here, but that there's this profound connection with all matter. And it could be inanimate matter, actually, as well as animate.
If such exists.
I was just going to say, if there is such a distinction, there may not be a distinction. You know, rocks may have an animals that we don't know about or whatever. So I absolutely agree. And I think that is what is so moving and powerful about the somatic movement, that it enables one to connect on this very, very deep level. And when you were talking about being aware of yourself at a cellular level, that also, I believe, is a kind of cosmic dance, because I believe our cells are all kind of constantly in movement. So we are already involved in a cosmic dance. We might be sitting as still as we possibly can, or we may be lying prone on the ground, but actually at a cellular level, we are still in a dance. And that's a really kind of joyful thought, actually. It's yeah, it's joyful, I find, you know.
What you're saying is reminding me about, sorry for kind of mentioning something of I'm looking for the book up here. I think it's this is right in front of me. It reminds me of one of the many fascinating approaches to somatic movement that's called continuum, because of now we're mentioning this resonance and the continuum of life existing and connecting at different levels, all kind of having to do with our beginning into some kind of ocean, evolutionary and personally. And that's Emily Conrad. This is, can you see the
Life on Land, Emily Conrad, Life on Land, the story of continuum.
I recommend the book. It's the poetry and the soulfulness, the spirituality of this very down to earth book, and person. So, and that's for me what it's about. It's not particularly the approach that I am deepening, but it reminded me of this when we are talking about the continuum of life, and how we, to maintain our routine now, because of what we said, into our talking about somatic movement, is it's important when we do this work, if we're doing this work or sharing it, to maintain that routine, the rooting into, but I'm still in my body, I'm still in this body, and I'm still here. And that's what in some approaches is called developing your own inner witness. And sometimes we develop it by having an external witness. Now we learn to internalize it and we become our witness. It's also a Buddhist concept.
Yes.
to be able to observe yourself as you experience
Yes.
from the body, because that is the difference between losing ground and going off and experiencing states that then become discomforting or traumatizing, and having a connection instead with the immensity that we carry in our being, in our cellular being, our biological being, the infinity that we get in touch with. So if there is any form of enlightenment, I like that one.
Yes. I think we slightly lost you for a moment there, Filomena, but I think the word that I got from that really resonated with me was the immensity of our being, because that's the feeling that one gets when you're really sort of deeply connected in this, when doing this, any kind of dance or movement or somatic movement practice, that, you know, one's life is more, not to be too earnest about it, but one's life is bigger, more important, subtler, and far more interesting than we realized in our youth, in our younger days, perhaps. And I'm talking here about teenage years or student years. That it enables us to connect with the sort of immensity of our being and our awareness as well. I think that's the other thing, that it's, to use a rather hackneyed phrase, it does expand our awareness, and enables us to see that we are part of this cosmic awareness, I think, in some way, and that our understanding of that phrase might vary from individual to individual, you know, and I'm not trying to put a particular meaning on it. But immensity that you said there, I think that's such a good word, you know.
Well, for me, that immensity is very, very down to earth. It is very embodied. Yes. It is very, very. It's here. It's not to be found somewhere far away or into transcending. I have a problem with the use of the word transcendent, because transcending means to go through and beyond. And I think that until that the first movement that needs to happen is to descend. Descend in the body. The descent that then allows, once I have fully am this body, and the word like the ego, I have a problem with those two. One thing is being egotistic, where it's all about your bigging yourself for your fulfillment of an image or of some dissatisfaction or some need for greatness. The ego is the function that we need in this body to deal with reality, so regulates, makes sure that we don't lose our minds.
Yes.
We don't lose our. That we can regulate and keep safe. We can regulate ourselves, but and regulate each other, but without owning those, the body and that part of ourselves that keeps an eye on our relationship inside and the outside. We can't transcend. If we transcend without being there, we just lose. We just dissolve into something that, you know, we call it different things. Transcendence begins here. I think that's. I'm getting quite messianic here in my. I'm really excited about this. I'm not an evangelical about the body. But it's just, I feel I've discovered something that's very, very obvious. That's an immense resource. So the immensity for me, to go back to it, sorry for the long round, is about, for me, discovering that what is within me and what makes me this body is the same as what makes every other being and every other living reality outside and inside of me. And that means that it's infinite,
Mm.
and that it is impossible to be alone. It's impossible. It's not, it may be a way we feel, but our condition, to me, it's not alone.
Mm-hmm.
Because we infinitely share the presence of life in the structure of our cells, and the way that this makes us just like every other life form here. Everything that moves, the planets, the stars.
Yeah. But that's a really beautiful insight, you know, that we are moving, we share something in common with the planets and the stars, the whole universe around us. And every other living thing, we share something in common
And we affect
with that.
we are part of each other's lives. We do affect each other, and that's a very important consciousness, I think, especially at this time in history.
Yes,
Right.
yes, how very true. Yeah, we just need to keep putting that message out there, I think. But I think that's so right, and it's a very moving thought and a very beautiful thought, really. I mean, thank you. I mean, our hour is very nearly up, Filomena, and I just wanted really to stop there because I am just so moved by that very beautiful thought that we have everything in common with the universe and with the stars and the moon and all of the other planets. And it's just such a beautiful and poetic image, I think, that you've conjured up there. I wish we could go on, really. I hope that we might have another conversation sometime. But it's been really, really interesting to speak to you and to hear about your thoughts and your experience of movement and dance in particular. Certainly, it's enhanced my experience of somatic movement sessions with yourself and my own thoughts about my own dance interest and background and all the rest of it. I can only thank you so much, Filomena, for joining me and for sharing all of those really deep insights of yours, and really leading us into another way of thinking about movement, dance, and why it's important and what it means to us. And I'm going to think about the idea that our cells are in constant movement as well. I'm really going to think about that and about the need to be really grounded and then to take it out from there, and in order to connect with the immensity and infinity of our lives. So thank you so much.
I want to thank you too, and I really want to say this, that I know that I'm sure we'll have more conversations on or off screen about this, because that's what we do. But also, I really want to thank you for sharing your thoughts as well, and your insights and your experience of the inner and outer life of the body. We shared those very openly and very readily. And this wasn't an interview. To me, this is a conversation. I really immensely, when I speak to you, I feel prompted and inspired by your curiosity and the way that you ask questions. It's a very two-way thing, and I've enjoyed it immensely. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Filomena. I am always very interested and curious in what makes people tick and what it's all about. So thank you so much for saying that. It's been really, really nice to talk with you today.
Thank you.
And I'm sure we'll go on and do more. Thank you so much.
You too.
So it just remains for me to thank everyone who joined us live. I think there were 2 or 3 people watching this live. And Phil and Eddie, thank you. And also to everyone who's watched this on the replay, thank you so much for watching this at a later time that suits you. So I'm Jane Hill. This has been The Secret Spirit. I'll be back next month, I hope, with another conversation with another interesting person to talk to. That makes it, that with another fascinating and deep conversation. So thank you everyone for joining us. Bye-bye for now. Bye-bye, Filomena.